Hello, and welcome to this episode of Wellness by Design. I'm Jane Hogan, the wellness engineer, and today we're talking about Ayurveda and how Ayurveda can help. The principles of Ayurveda can help lower pain and inflammation. I'm really excited today to welcome Karta Purkh Singh Khalsa. Welcome, KP.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. This topic has been an interest of mine for a long time. Not that I've really acted on it by learning a whole lot more. That's why I've got you here. But I know that Ayurveda is this sister science to yoga. I'm a yoga instructor, and I know there's so much wisdom to be learned. It's ancient wisdom. So I'm really excited to share that with the audience. I'm just going to tell them a little bit about you so that they know your background and why we've asked you to be on the show. So Karta Purkh Singh Khalsa, AD, D.N C, and RH is an herbalist, nutritionist, yoga teacher, and educator who has been making holistic health approaches palatable to the modern mind for over 50 years. He was the first person to be professionally certified in both herbalism and Ayurveda in the US. He is president emeritus of the American Herbalist Guild and Director Emeritus of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association. So we are in good hands with you, KP.
Let's hope so.
I think so. So first of all, like, can you give us like a overview of what Ayurveda actually is for the brand new person? Ayurveda 101.
Absolutely. So we often do call Ayurveda the sister science of yoga, but really that even separates them too much. They're the same thing. They come from the same roots. They have the same objectives, keeping people healthy physically, mentally, and spiritually, and they're just completely interwoven. In today's world, Ayurvedic doctors often practice and recommend yoga, and yoga teachers often practice and recommend Ayurveda. So the same reasons that you do certain yoga poses to affect various organs and circulation and such in your body, Ayurveda uses those same ideas. While yoga is a little bit more oriented toward spiritual progress, Ayurveda is more about keeping your physical body healthy while you're doing that. So Ayurveda treats
Ah.
symptomatic issues like cold and flu, but also helps you develop a body that will be healthy for the rest of your life. So long-term preventive anti-aging, and of course, we know how much inflammation is associated with aging. Anyway, treatment in that way, and then also treating individual specific symptoms when they come up. It involves usually a lot of herbal medicine, dietary suggestions, but really has teachings for every aspect of your life. When and how you should go to bed, how you should sleep, how and when you should eat, your diet, your activities, all of that, one way or another, you can study and optimize so that you can get back to the level of health that you enjoyed, hopefully when you were younger, and then continue that.
Mm. So it's addressing the body, the expression of the physical body, and how to keep that optimal. Okay, so how is it different from other practices like, traditional Chinese medicine and some of these other ancient practices like that?
Ayurveda is very similar to Chinese medicine. They're about 90% identical in terms of their underlying philosophy and um, methods and like that. Now, the pharmacopoeia is different. So the herbs that grow in China are different than the herbs that grow in India, but there's about a 1/3 overlap between them, herbs that would be used in both systems. And in fact, at one time, if we go back to the time Hippocrates was practicing in classical Greece, which was about 2,300 years ago, there was a system that was being used by all people across the Eurasian continent. So Hippocratic medicine is essentially identical to those other two as well. Now that gradually fell away with changes in Europe and modernization. It was the original route for what we understand today as Western natural healing and or modern medicine, but people typically don't practice those kinds of ideas, those ideas that would be comparable to Ayurveda in Europe today. But it has roots going into all those systems, and it's been uh, researched and explored for 5,000 years, but especially for the last, let's say, 2,000 years, it's really um, been put together in a very systematic, consistent way, and books have been written, and you can learn it in school.
And lots of science studies done on it as well, different scientific studies. So it kind of makes so total sense that the herbs, if they're going to be native to the country where they're grown, so it explains why there would be different ones for traditional Chinese medicine and for Ayurveda, although you said there's a lot of overlap. So, how does Ayurveda treat inflammation in the body?
Ayurveda divides all the physiological functions of the body in a very general, broad spectrum way into three categories. Each one of those is called a dosha. You probably heard that word. Dosha means something that's rotten or faulty or not working right. And so we're looking for problems in the body. Ayurveda, in a certain way, has a very negative attitude. We're looking for problems and comparing that to the perfect human being. So when you go to an Ayurvedic practitioner, you never get the perfect bill of health because nobody's perfect. There's always something to work on. And even if you had the perfect body, you could work on your mind. So those three primal metabolic forces called doshas are understood in terms of their energetics, or things that you can feel in the body or understand about the body with your senses. Those doshas are called vata, pitta, and kapha. And they control everything in the body. We're concerned about them for two reasons. One is that when you are born, you're born with a particular proportion of those three metabolic forces in your body, and that's going to stay with you throughout your entire life. Now, though what actually changes today can change over time, and we're concerned about that as well. So you have a blueprint, and then you have whatever is happening today that may or may not be different than the blueprint. The one that we're concerned about from the point of view of Ayurveda is Pitta, which is transformative energy, fire, electrical impulses in the body, strong secretions like hydrochloric acid. All those things are fiery, transformative kinds of ideas. And we could make a pretty good translation between the Ayurvedic idea of Pitta, what the general tendency that your body has to inflame and develop inflammatory diseases, especially during midlife. And then also, did that happen today? Do you have an inflammatory disease? So we're looking at the long-term effect so that we can prevent those problems, and then how to treat them today if they need treatment.
Hmm. About all I know is that I was told that I was Pitta, or Pitta dominant, I guess. And now that you're saying this, it makes a lot of sense. Um, so is the idea that we make that Pitta less dominant if we're trying to get inflammation down?
That's exactly right. So everything in Ayurveda is classified according to its effect on the three doshas, and they're always in proportion. So the way the nomenclature works is that when you suppress one, the other two automatically are increased. So Vata and Kapha are both cold doshas. They're things that bring cold to the body. And so when we want to treat the hot energy of Pitta, we're going to use cooling things. That's going to be suppressed. It's going to increase the others. We want those things to be in balance, or at least as close to balance as we can get. We call that the zone of dynamic balance, where it may not be perfect, but it's close enough so that you're not experiencing symptoms. So a
Mm.
person like you, who was born with the general tendency to gradually drift in the inflammatory direction, we could have noticed that when you were young and prevented those things, but that didn't happen. So now here we are. You're in your midlife. That's the time when inflammatory diseases uh, tend to show themselves. And our idea then would be to control Pitta through using things that are classified as Pitta controlling herbs, food, lifestyle, moods, when and how to sleep, everything you could imagine about your body and the way you make it through the world are divided into these three categories. So things that suppress Pitta. Pretty easy to look these things up on the internet, or find a book, an introductory book about these, and just focus on the Pitta parts, things to do to lower Pitta.
Mm. Can you give us some examples of what some of them might be?
Well, yeah, so people with high Pitta tend to be productive, but to a fault, doing four jobs at a time, doing them at a breakneck pace, usually being the director, the foreman of the crew, that kind of thing. So we don't want that to happen. That just increases what we would call heat, or metabolic activity. And in fact, let's define that a little bit, because when we say heat, that might include body temperature, But really what we're more concerned about is that the body is running faster and burning more calories than it really needs to process efficiently. And so we have this extra heat. We could call that hyper metabolic. Heart
Mm.
tends to beat faster, squeeze harder, uh, circulation goes faster, digestion goes more quickly than ideal, that kind of thing. And that tends to then eventually create these inflammatory problems, whether it's in the gut, like colitis, or in the joints, like arthritis.
Mm. Is this connected with emotions as well, or is it strictly physical?
Well, very definitely. And the emotions go back and forth between the idea of these doshas. So Pitta tends to produce anger, impatience, judgmental things, that sort of thing. But also those things produce more Pitta. So we would like people with high Pitta not to get into those environments, not to get into a situation where you have to be perfectionistic or make judgments about situations or get angry at people. We want people to be calm and cool to control Pitta.
Oh, even that word cool, right? Calm and cool.
Yeah.
It's cooling. Oh, I wish I'd known about all this years ago. It's fascinating. So I know that you're also an herbalist, and so that goes hand in hand. So what kind of herbs would be used with someone with pitta?
Yeah, well, so everybody's heard of turmeric. It's the hot number these days. I've been a turmeric missionary for 50 years. It was one of the first herbs I learned. I began to see the great things that it could do, and I was sort of, um, knocking on on the door, but not being let in. But now I feel validated because it's the most researched substance in scientific history.
It
But
is.
we all know that's anti-inflammatory. Another herb we might use is guduchi, 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 comes from Asia and is a cooling herb that is detoxifying, but also tissue building. That's very unusual. Most natural remedies do one or the other. They detoxify or they build tissue, fundamentally opposite uh, processes. So Guduchi, you can take a little bit every day as a long-term health-enhancing anti-aging kind of remedy, but you can also use it in higher doses to control inflammation today. Another very famous anti-inflammatory from Ayurveda is the herb amla, AMLA. That's a fruit about the size of a golf ball, and it's full of a whole bunch of antioxidant substances. Of course, oxidation produces heat, and so we and tissue damage. We don't want oxidation. So amla, very famous, widely studied antioxidant. All these are available in bulk powder form or pills, and you could use the amount, gradually increase the amount until it made you feel best. Turmeric, it's pretty much unlimited the amount that you can take, and you can just increase that dose until you feel best. Guduchi, the dose is about, let's say, 8 grams, something like that. And again, amla, very much a food-like herb, so you could take up to 20 grams a day, or even just a gram a day, to support your inflammation.
Mm. All right, that's interesting. I wonder, I know this may not be in your field here, but I wonder if there's, things in our area of the world, herbs that would also be cooling. Like, do you have any background with that?
Oh, absolutely. So everywhere on the planet, there are collections of things that will do the things that people want. Um, Ayurveda has not studied herbs from North America to any great extent, so we don't have Ayurvedic information. Of course,
Right.
uh, since the information about the Western Hemisphere was only taken back to the Eastern Hemisphere about 500 years ago, there's not going to be anything in the classics. But in more modern times, people have begun to look at these things and start to classify these things. So another herb uh, that we could use is willow, which grows on every continent and it, as a temperate plant. Here in North America, we have white willow that grows east of the Mississippi. That's a very famous anti-inflammatory. It's
Mhm.
what aspirin came from originally, and so that can be used to control inflammation as well as fever and pain. And if you pair that herb with the herb cinchona, which is thought of as a Western herb, although it comes from the originally the jungles of South America. Cinchona is the plant from which the drug quinine was extracted. So both of those are very cold herbs. Cinchona, very bitter, very cold. So if we use those together, they enhance each other's effects and are great for reducing inflammation.
Okay, so would you just take like one of these at a time, or would you mix these up? What's kind of the protocol there?
The ones that I'm giving you are all safe to be taken together. Probably the way to do it would be to start with one, work your way up to the dose that seems appropriate, continue that for maybe a month or so. If you're noticing some difference, great. Experiment with the dose to push it up to the point where either you have a side effect, in which case you back off, or you're getting the results that you want and you continue, and then you could add another one. If you take all of them together, then you just don't know which is
Yeah.
doing what. So start with one and kind of scientifically
Mm. Too many
work your
variables
way
in the
up.
experiment.
That's right.
Right. Okay, now earlier on, KP, you mentioned about lifestyle, like how Ayurveda talks about, how you, when you go to bed, when you get up, things that you eat, those kinds of things. So, can we dive into that a little bit?
Oh, definitely. So it's all about cooling for Pitta. Of the three doshas, it's the only hot one. And so it's everything that we do to control it is almost all about cooling. So cooling food, which we can talk about in a moment if you choose. Otherwise, getting enough sleep, going to bed appropriately. People with high pitta tend to be very productive and are often, as I said, doing a lot of different things. And we want them, and they just have to be on full blast all the time to be able, to do all those things. And so
Yeah.
we ask them to, cut their workload or their work plus volunteer plus recreation, all that, down by half or something. And then we begin to see their skin inflammation and their eye problems and their falling hair and their hemorrhoids gradually reduce. Also, just being in a cooling environment. So not having the house be not too hot, going outside in the cool evening, taking a walk along the water and watching the swans, reading poetry to your romantic partner, and those kinds of things. Everything just cooling down, slowing down, everything about lifestyle. And yes, it's true. You won't be as productive as you were before you did all those things. But before, you were 150% as productive as everybody else on your team. Now you're just going to be 110% as productive as everybody on your team. Everybody has some room to kind of pull back and cool down.
Yeah, I feel like you're describing me over and over again. Yeah, just always go, go, go. I remember one time when my kids were little, my daughter said, um, something like, Dad's always napping, isn't he? Because he's definitely not Pitta. And not like you, Mom, you're always doing something. And
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, I've always been like that. And of course, it really didn't do me any favors in the long run. But even now, when you're saying this, I think, oh, how am I going to make myself rest more? But I know it's what I need to do. And when I start getting really, really busy, that's when I start to feel more inflammation in my body. So I
yeah,
know
exactly.
this to be true. What you're
That's right.
saying is absolutely right. So it's the tendency that I have to work with. Now, I wonder, what about having like a hot bath before going to bed? Is that something Pitta people shouldn't do?
That's okay as long as it's not too hot. So
Okay.
we want to avoid chemical heat. That is things that are producing hot things in your body, like extra hydrochloric acid or extra stimulating kinds of chemicals. And we want to avoid thermometer kind of heat. So taking a tepid bath or, just barely warm kind of bath, probably better than the full hot bath. All of these things, though, have to be something that you experiment with and you find that they work or not, and then you use what works.
Sounds very much like it is an experiment with this. You're really tuning into yourself and paying attention to what's working, right? In an experiment of one, knowing that there's guidelines to follow.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit, KP, about the foods. I'm curious about this.
Yeah, interestingly, if we divide the entire planet into these three doshas and their predominance, there would be about equal numbers of people in that have these three basic types of categories of metabolism. And people with high pitta tend to be the most difficult to change their diet. People have discovered, usually when we go back to, 10, 11, 12 years old, this is already locked in, that certain kinds of foods give them certain kinds of mental states and certain kinds of ways in their body that get them what they need out of life. So the high point for Pitta is productivity, and people around them begin to notice that they're very good at doing that. They do a lot of things, they get a lot done, and they get strokes for that. So they want to keep doing more than that. And eventually they've discovered that certain dietary things help fuel them in that way and help them get, get more things done. So the counterpoint to that is the inflammation that that's going to provoke, either short term or long term. So number one is no hot spices. And of all the things we talk about in Ayurveda, getting people with high pitta to not do this is one of the most difficult things in the whole, system. When Hillary Clinton was running for president, there were all these jokes about the fact that she carried a bottle of hot sauce in her purse. And, politicians go to all these, diners and have breakfast with the local public and like that. And she would always whip out a bottle of hot sauce and slather her meal before she even tasted it, and the cook would say, hey, wait a minute, taste it before you put all that on. But I think we could all agree that she's a driven person, got a lot done, very productive, an intense personality, that kind of thing. I'm not talking about her politics, just her physiology. So no hot spices, and then adding green vegetables. Green vegetables is the category of food that's the most anti-inflammatory. And if it's green, it's what we want. So the greener, the better. So that would include spinach, green beans, cabbage, sprouts, zucchini. Anything that's green, the greener, the better. We don't know what about those green vegetables is so cooling. Magnesium is what makes them green. And so it may be the magnesium content. We just don't know yet. Among the many, many things that humans have discovered work over the last 5,000 years, this is one of those things that hasn't been studied. It would be easy to study, but just hasn't been done yet. So adding green vegetables in any proportion, the more the better. Green vegetable juice, salad vegetables, all those things. So no hot spices and green vegetables, the number one dietary things for inflammation.
That's really just simple to remember too. So, what's the thoughts on animal protein?
Well, Ayurveda in itself, since that's what we're talking about, doesn't have teachings about that in particular. Some people tolerate it okay, some people don't. And Ayurveda is a medical system, not an ethical or moral
Yeah.
system. So it comes from a place where most people these days are ethically vegetarian. And so it has to get along with that. Most Ayurvedic physicians from India are vegetarian, or at least sympathetic to that idea. So Ayurveda generally says that animal protein is inflammatory, and just to watch it. So you have to, again, experiment and find out if it provokes inflammation or not. The main thing about animal protein in Ayurveda, now we're talking about flesh. Milk is another matter, but flesh is generally difficult to digest. And so you have to make sure that it's being digested properly and not overwhelming your digestive system. So Ayurveda recommends relatively small portions and relatively well cooked, made into soup and things like that, so that you can digest it well. And the Ayurveda has criteria to determine when you're digesting it or not.
Okay. And is fasting part of the Ayurvedic science at all?
Can be. Just about any question that you would ask is, fill in the blank part of Ayurveda. It almost always is, because, 5,000 years people have experimented with everything. So some people benefit from fasting, some people don't. So I have the type of physiology, for example, that generally tolerates fasting well and generally gets some benefit from that. So I've done a lot of that over the course of my life. Pitta is kind of in the middle. Vata dosha is the destructive dosha, or the dosha that has difficult, people that are Vata have difficulty digesting and assimilating nutrients. So we encourage them not to fast, or at least only under very controlled circumstances. So it depends on the person and the circumstance.
So interesting. All right, I've got one last thing. I when before we hit record, you were saying that I looked like a pitta. So there's physical features associated with these as well?
Definitely. Yeah. So in
Let's
terms of, yeah, do you want me to say about why with you that I said that?
sure.
Yeah, okay. Well, medium-sized body in general, features of the face more close together, that is not, extended in a vertical kind of direction. Eye color, kind of a, medium neck. I can see your bone structure to a certain extent. It's basically medium, whereas my bone structure is larger than yours, for example. And then, we might find someone else that has smaller bones. So Pitta is kind of in the middle on just about everything in terms of, structure and shape and like that. Musculature, easy to develop musculature. And then, I know a little bit about your background because we've spoken before. And so I knew that that was, where it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess what you're saying is that if people are experiencing inflammation, then they're definitely, you know, pitta dominant then.
Well,
Is that a
they
fair
are,
statement
well, they are Pitta dominant at the moment. Now, whether or not
at
they're
the moment?
Pitta constitution, we would call it, their blueprint, we don't know. But usually, yes, usually whatever the blueprint is the thing that goes on to be the thing that creates diseases. But, it can change. So you might have someone who's uh, very slim, let's say has small bones and small muscles and little body fat. So, they look like that when they're 20, but when they're 60, they've gained 100 pounds. And now that's all kapha excess, we would call it. But they still have underneath the same body with the small muscles and the small bones. And so we have to handle that 50 pounds of extra fat that they've gained as a separate issue. That's now their dominant issue, but it wasn't their constitution. So
Right.
things can change, but usually it just goes right in the direction it was programmed to.
So interesting. I love this. I could keep asking you questions all day, but I should probably just get myself a book on it and start to learn a little bit more. Okay, I always ask this one question, and that is, if what would you recommend someone to do today to start to improve their health? Because this show is about intentional living, and obviously if you're taking all of the Ayurveda into consideration, you're going to be living intentionally. So, where would you recommend starting?
Eat more vegetables.
Ah,
Diet is the thing that most people have done the worst for the longest. And so it has the greatest impact on everything about a person, but it tends to be kind of slow. Unless someone does a really extreme diet like keto or something, otherwise, generally speaking, they go from eating their funky diet to their perfect diet. It takes a few months to really notice, much difference. Uh, from that. And so it's difficult to motivate people to do that, but it's critically important over the course of the rest of your life. And when I talk to people hour after hour, the thing that they are doing the least is eating vegetables. They're eating burritos from the gas station for all kinds of reasons. They don't cook, they don't have a pan, all of that. But vegetables of any kind, and for inflammation in particular, we talked about the green vegetables.
yeah. Okay, that's great advice. So just start with adding some more green vegetables to your plate.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So where can people find out more about you, more about Ayurveda? Where's the best place?
Yeah, you could certainly start at my website. The things that I do are not limited to Ayurveda, but that's the thing that, I have a doctorate in that. So that's the thing that most people kind of search me out for. My website is International Integrative, those two words, international, and then integrative with a V, integrative, international integrative, all one word.com. But probably just searching by my name will be simpler and we'll get you there. So go to the website and we have tremendous amount of resources there. Check it out. See what's good for you.
And we've got the links there as well, so we'll be
Great.
sharing that. Okay, so this is fantastic. I've learned so much already today, and actually, it's really piqued my interest to learn more, especially because I am a yoga instructor. I want to tie it in together more. So I just thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of this. Is there anything else we haven't said or talked about yet that you really want to make sure the audience hears?
Well, just that all these things work tremendously. They work far better than you ever knew. You have to study them a bit and really actually apply them. You have to actually do it. But natural medicine offers so many opportunities to get well that people, just aren't aware of. And I talk to people every day about, you mean you can really do that? Yeah. But I think I've been preaching to the choir to, a bunch of aging hippies for the last 50 years. And now we have things like, your um, podcast here. where we can get the information out. So just be optimistic about where you can go with all these things. You can get a lot better.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being part of that movement to help people learn more about this. And there really is a lot that people can do themselves. They can become empowered in their health, which is what this show is all about. So thank you so much for being a guest today, KP.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks to everyone for listening or watching. If you're watching this on YouTube or somewhere else, one of my other channels. And if you know someone that needs to hear this, please share this with them and help spread the word about empowered health. We really want to help people understand that there's a lot you can do to get that inflammation and pain down so that you can live your life like you're supposed to. Have a great day. Bye.